Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it. Vacation, the golden dream of most of the population of the planet, spending almost the entire year at work and the opportunity to relax, forget about problems. Bosses make people spend huge sums on trips to exotic countries, buy tons of souvenirs, and indulge in inaccessible luxury. That's what she thought sitting in a stuffy office at a window overlooking a neighboring building. The gray brick wall perfectly matched her state of mind. She was terribly tired of work. Low wages, overtime on weekends, and unpaid overtime. The dream of a vacation was becoming an obsession. The girl was no longer happy. And at home with her husband, all conversations were reduced to a discussion of resorts. Where better, cheaper, more interesting and fulfilling? What resort praised this or that colleague? No, just think about it. Katya from accounting department went on vacation with her husband for the second time this year. Why does she need such a husband? She's so stupid. She doesn't know how to dress at all. But she took a businessman and barely has time to choose resorts and branded clothes at work. I bet she goes to work just to piss us off. Honey, you're still the most beautiful, successful. Shyly tried to answer her husband. But Lilia did not need his comments to talk. Well, it's just indecent to flaunt her financial capabilities like this in a team that can't afford even half of what she spends her money on. Another man would probably have freaked out or stopped this stream of one-sentence chatter. But Lilia's husband was a weak-willed man who was happy to go along with whatever she chatted. At one time, Thomas considered the happiest day when a tall, showy blonde from the neighboring office agreed to go out with him. Quite unexpectedly, this blonde not only endured his boring chit-chat about computers and software, but also offered to make a second date. Further events developed so rapidly that my mother's son became a newlywed in just 2 months, with all the ensuing consequences. A mortgage, a car loan, repairs, and dreams of a vacation. It wasn't to say that Lilia didn't love her husband at all and married him out of convenience. He wasn't a bad option for a lazy air officer whose chances of getting married were dwindling with each passing year. By the time she was 30, she was determined to marry a quiet guy they often met for lunch in a cafe. He was a good match. The naive guy didn't even realize it himself when he asked the girl out on a date, and then on a second date, and then on a second date, and then he called her to the registry office. Even now, after 3 years of marriage, the woman is sometimes surprised by her husband's naivety. There was no guile or selfishness in him. In his 40s, he resembled a big grown-up child whose needs were limited to delicious food, a minimum supply of clothes, and a computer. All his evenings were spent working or playing games. Lilia did not get into what he was doing there. The main thing was that he pretended to listen to her endless streams of misery and vacation speeches. No children ever happened in their marriage. It turned out that Thomas had contracted an illness as a teenager that gave rise to complications and permanently deprived the guy of the chance to be a father. Lilia, who had never aspired to motherhood, accepted this news with some inner relief. In general, all the points of her plans for life were closed. Marriage, a car, a place to live, a job. It remained only this notorious vacation. She herself did not understand why it had become her obsession. Probably the culprit was the evenings, not matching schedules of vacations and weekends. Thomas worked for 2 organizations on a 2x2 schedule, which means he had no days off. Nominally, he had a vacation, but in fact, instead of vacation, he took financial compensation. Lilia had a vacation, but she spent it at her mother's dacha, who had decided to learn farming and gardening when she got her well-deserved vacation. It turned out that such an elementary and necessary part of life as an annual vacation was simply absent in life, but it was more than replaced by talking and dreaming. Despite her busy schedule, her husband did not bring much money to the family budget, and even that went to pay the mortgage. All the household expenses were incurred by Lilia, and there was no way to get an extra ruble for a trip. Thomas, maybe you should look for another job. You earn a little more at 2 jobs than I do at 1. We'll never get out of debt that way. And the years go by. I'm not getting any younger. I'd like to see the world, too. And there's a lot of fun to be had. Lilia, you know, these days every high school kid knows a lot about computers. I was lucky that I could find these 2 jobs. But I want to go to the sea. Can I go for a week? Mom promised to give me some money. I don't want my wife to attract unnecessary male attention when I'm not around. What if they start hitting on you? Even if they start looking at me, it's only to appreciate the cheap things I'm wearing. This is how their conversations usually ended. Calculating and nimble Lilia, as it turned out, did not know how to manage her husband. He knew how to say no in such a way that she had nothing to complain about. He cared for her, recognized her incomparable beauty, but did not let her go to the resort alone. All in all, she had nowhere to learn. Her mother raised her alone, just as her grandmother had once raised her without a husband. But both had excuses. Her grandfather went to the front, not even knowing that his young wife was expecting a child. He died in the first battle, never knowing that a few months later he was to have a daughter. His mother, who had a tougher temperament, had been with her husband for only a month. 2 equally hard and irreconcilable characters could not get along in the 9 square meters of the family dorm room. Lilia's father and never met his daughter. Even child support was hard for the mother to get through the courts. In such an atmosphere, it was hard to become a femme fatale with a heartbreaker. But ever since she was a little girl, she was determined that she would definitely have a husband. And not for a month, but for life. So she made a calculation on the soft-heartedness, insecurity of her mother's pampered sons. She learned too late that such men do not know how to earn good money and do not strive for wealth. Her mother-in-law reminded her of her own grandmother, who had also failed to raise her son to be a breadwinner who could take responsibility. Her husband took little interest in the fate of his growing offspring. He spent most of his time with his friends. So it turned out that the boy was not ready for family life, and he was not planning to get married. After receiving a weak certificate in school, and then with difficulty graduating from technical school, Thomas found a job in his field, but it did not bring a significant income. He carefully saved his small salary. After his father passed away, he and his mother were left alone in a spacious 3-room apartment. It was decided to exchange it for 1 and 2 rooms in a small 1-room apartment. They huddled together with their mother and rented out the 2-room apartment. "Son, you could add to my utility bill, at least from the money the tenants pay. I already don't have enough for everything, or at least buy groceries." "Mom, but how can I add? You know how little I get. I'm just barely enough to support myself. Moreover, we agreed that you pay for the apartment. It's your property, and my other apartment is practically no income." "But maybe you should move into your own apartment," shyly asked my mother. "You would be more free. Maybe you could find a wife." "What wife? How am I going to support her? Besides, it's inconvenient for me to go from that apartment to work, and cooking and cleaning is not a man's job. It's not hard for you. You're home all day." And so he lived until he was 37, when Lilia laid eyes on him. Then prudent Thomas did not tell his wife about the premarital property in the form of an apartment. Lilia, who lived with her mother and grandmother, was so tired of squatting with older women that she didn't care much about what assets her future husband had. And Thomas liked her so much that he was willing to make drastic changes in his life. Although he hadn't been in a serious relationship before, and he didn't consider having a woman in his life a necessity. "It's okay. It will work. I'll put him on mortgages and loans. We'll have an apartment." After the wedding, Thomas did indeed meekly agree to mortgages and loans, all the conditions of his wife. He didn't expect anyone at all to agree to marry him, who was unsightly, not old, and lived with his mother. The man had no close friends to whom he would tell them more about himself. In fact, Thomas had a dream so bright and unattainable that at first he didn't even dare to think about it. As he grew up, he began to realize that this dream had a very real chance of coming true if he tried a little harder, if he saved a little harder, if he saved a little money, lived off his mother, put aside his salary, or sold his apartment. After my father was gone, the first impulse was to sell the 3-room apartment and spend the money on the dream. But then the question arose, where would he and my mother live? Orphanwell, he pondered. I'll invest the money in a smaller place and start saving. Quite unexpectedly, marriage happened in his life. However, he did not give up on his dream and carefully saved for it. But he was afraid to share it with others. Surprisingly, both Thomas and Lily made one condition before the wedding: to sign a marriage contract, despite the fact that they had no apparent reason to enter into it. Neither of them was rich, neither of them intended to have affairs on the side, and neither of them owned any significant property. It seemed to them the height of practicality. According to the terms of the contract, all property remained as such. The property acquired during the marriage was then left to the couple, who invested the largest amount in acquiring it. It was this point that later proved to be the most painful, and in the case of marital infidelity, all major purchases were left to the offended party, and she herself was entitled to compensation. This last point was particularly insisted upon by Lilia I, having been impressed by the many books on family psychology she had read. Thomas grudgingly agreed. So after 3 years of marriage, Lily still had not given up hope of adjusting her husband to her own needs. In principle, she was happy with his softness and malleability, his ease. He quickly found common ground with her mother, and his mother tried to please her daughter. And his mother tried to please her daughter. In-law in everything. One thing that troubled Lilia was money. There was a catastrophic lack of it in family life. And on all sides she heard only the news about how the rest and where this or that wretch was. Realizing that this could no longer go on, Lilia decided to influence her husband through his mother. Mother, I have told you many times that I am young. I want to relax, to see the world, and your son has no desire for high earnings and to improve our living conditions. I work just as hard as your Thomas. My salary goes entirely into living expenses. I simply have nothing to take some money from for a vacation, and I can't go on without it for long. The elderly woman, who was so happy that her son was now a family man, made a difficult, but in her opinion, the only decision. Talking to her husband was pointless. She remembered how reluctantly he had parted with the money after the exchange of the apartment. Telling her daughter-in-law about the second apartment was also dangerous. She did not know why her son had kept quiet about it. But to pay for the children's vacation was quite within the power of an elderly woman. True, the money had to be taken from those that she had set aside for a rainy day. Here, my daughter, I decided to help you. Buy yourself a trip to the sea. I've heard you can go on holiday at any time now. My God, Mom, you're a miracle worker. Where did you get that kind of money? And you said you lived modestly. I think there's something you're not telling us. Lilia chirped like a bird, while at the same time she thought that sometimes her husband's mother sponsored them, giving them money for small gifts for the young family. Lilia, you should rest there properly and buy yourself some outfits so that Thomas would be proud of his wife. Well, there's certainly not enough money for outfits. Just for a week, a cheap resort. Oh well, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. The last phrase was said quietly, but the elderly mother-in-law heard it. She didn't show it, but she was very upset. Mother, you Thomas, do not tell me that I have money for the vacation. I understand correctly, it's a gift. If it's a loan, you'll have to wait a long time for that money. We're a bit short of it at the moment." "No, of course you did. What debt? Have a nice holiday." "Oh, thank you." So the woman finally got a chance to go on vacation. She was not walking, but flying, barely touching the sidewalk. Despite the fact that it was early spring, it was already quite possible to think of a suitable option for the summer. Besides, having bought her ticket in advance, she could find a more affordable option. Think about it. Pick the best one. Besides, there was a hint of a bonus at work, and she wanted to buy groceries and household chemicals with it. Now the girl decided she needed the summer closet more, and her husband could go on a diet. He didn't even know about the bonus. Suddenly, it occurred to her that he shouldn't have bragged about bonuses and little bonuses at work at all. He smiled, gave a couple of nice but insignificant compliments, and continued to sit at his laptop. She hoped that, looking at her, he too would begin to strive to do a better job, to get bonuses from his bosses. Lilia was not justified. "Anne, I need a vacation in June." Lilia could barely make it through her lunch hour, so she could brag about her vacation to her acquaintance. She was busy with the vacation schedule and would put Lilia on May or September, or even 2 weeks each month, to plant her mother's sprouts at the cottage and harvest the crops. Why? It's too late to plant seedlings in June, and it's too early to harvest what's grown. Anne was genuinely puzzled as to why a girl would need a full vacation in the hottest month. In fact, she had already put Nadia on the schedule for September and had no plans to change anything. Moreover, she thought to just put the girl in front of the fact when the bosses have already signed the schedule. And then June came along. Say August, when the bosses are on vacation and the employees are with their children. Naturally, Anne decided to play dumb and steer Lily away from such a stupid solutions, like a full summer vacation for at least 2 weeks. In September, Anne will definitely be standing by until the last one. "I'm going on vacation with my spouse." Lilia still emphasized the word spouse, as if she herself still didn't believe she had one. And others were much less fortunate. "Oh, how well done." She smiled at Anne. "Did you think it was a bad time for you to get it?" "But you know, I cannot afford the velvet season. I have to choose from the beginning of the summer to gain strength to work when everyone will be resting." "Well, of course I understand," said Anne, while frantically trying to think how to dissuade the employee from such a rash move. "Well, if you understand, then put me on the schedule in June for the whole vacation." "Aren't you going to your mother's house this year? Or are you going to the sea for the whole month?" "No, of course not. Just for 10 days. Perhaps the last words were said too sadly," thought Lilia. "But then let me give you 2 weeks in June and 2 in September. What are you going to do in the city, in the heat of the day?" "I hadn't thought of that, to be honest. I just wanted to sunbathe at my mother's dacha, not to be like a pale moth at the sea." The girl admitted frankly. "Do you think that in June at the sea only tan chocolates? Where can you get a suntan in the spring? They go to the sea for it? It's amazing how convincing a person can be when he really needs it." In the end, colleagues agreed on 2 weeks of summer and 2 weeks of autumn vacation. It remained to break the happy news to her husband. Lilia hoped that he would be overjoyed and even earn some money so that his wife could go on vacation, dressed as a queen. Alas, the miracle did not happen. "Thomas, this year you have to take a vacation in the second half of June." Lilia could hardly contain herself from blurting out the news to her husband at once. "Why should I, darling? I told you I'm completely useless at the cottage. I do not know how to plant, dig, and perform other farming feats." "Well, what kind of a cottage at the end of June?" "You know, the planting season starts in May, and in June only watering. And with that, my mother is doing fine by herself." "Then I don't see why I need a vacation. You said yourself we need the money." "Yes, but I said I needed the money for a trip to the sea, and I have it. At that moment, you could light bulbs with a woman's eyes. She shone like a star in the sky, and she expected a brighter reaction from her husband. "Oh, how wonderful that is. Did they give you a prize?" "Thomas, you didn't hear me. We're going on vacation to the sea." "Yes, I heard you." My husband smiled at me. "Then why the reaction?" "But I just didn't expect you to find the money for it because I had to find it, or at least send me on a vacation." "You don't seem very happy at all." "I am. Why, the second half of June? It's the cheapest period. Besides, I only get 2 weeks off. I'll take the rest in the fall. So you need to talk to your boss." "Okay, I'll do my best." Thomas already knew he wasn't going anywhere for more than 4 or 5 days. The bosses at both jobs would let him go without question. But 5 days without his wife. It would be a sin not to take advantage of such a chance. But he was not going to tell his wife about it. Moreover, he decided to buy the tickets himself, so that his wife would not suspect anything and spoil everything. "You never told me where you got the money for the trip." He didn't really care where the money came from. The main thing was that now his wife would stop nagging him about this notorious trip. A generous benefactor had been found. The words came out of his mouth. Lilia did not intend to poke her husband and provoke jealousy. She sincerely did not understand married girls who bat their eyes at others, trying to arouse her husband's interest in them. She was satisfied with her status and did not want to test her husband's feelings. However, her husband did not hear her words. Half a minute later, he was completely absorbed in the work, not paying attention to his wife's words. Well, that's fine. Lilia was even glad that she and her husband had their own interests and hobbies. She loved to read and spent all her little spare time on reading. If they gave degrees for the books she read, she would have earned degrees in several areas of psychology long ago. Thomas was interested in real estate. He could spend hours studying the offers on the market, select the most profitable and promising. He attributed his fascination to the fact that it was part of one of his jobs. He was a graphic designer, and studying modern architecture inspired him. Raised by women, with no male involvement, Lilia, in her first year of marriage, simply could not believe that she now had a husband in her life. Strange as it may seem, she perceived her husband as some kind of exotic plant, despite the fact that she was marrying far from a young girl. At the age of 30, she had not had such serious affairs, but the relationship did not reach the point of living together. More often than not, relationships were limited to dates, trips to the movies, or walks around town. It never even occurred to her to take suitors home. Meeting her mother and grandmother was unlikely to endure any of the potential suitors. "Lilia, why don't you bring your suitors home?" "Sate, Grandma, it's not time yet, and we're not that serious." "Yes, that's right. There's no reason to drag anyone in here. Limit and newcomers, we do not need, and don't scare the wealthy with our poverty." She herself did not seek marriage after she divorced her daughter's father and did not think that her daughter should strive to get married. She considered education much more important, and so she tried to put her daughter's thirst for knowledge into her head. "Mother, as soon as a worthy candidate appears, I will introduce you to him. But if he doesn't, it's no big deal, right?" "I completely agree with you." Either she met really weak-willed and unserious, or she herself did not know men, but at the threshold of 30, she found herself unmarried without any prospect of a serious relationship. The only good thing was that she got out of all her few affairs with minimal loss. Many of her friends after a breakup were like cats after a fight. Tears, loss of interest in life, aborted pregnancies, or the birth of unwanted children. She, on the other hand, was spared such dire consequences. The next morning, her husband got up early, made her breakfast, and was uncharacteristically polite. It is worth noting that the woman had a good husband. He was attentive to her, did not get jealous, did not control every step, and compared to according to people she knew, her husband could claim to be perfect if he had a more substantial income. He explained this increased attention by saying that he wanted to thank her for solving the vacation money issue on her own. "Honey, you're just the perfect wife. I could not have dreamed of a better one. Beautiful, smart, independent, self-sufficient. I will try very hard to make this vacation worth your hope. Have you thought of anything in particular?" Lilia rarely got surprises from her husband. They both decided from the beginning of their relationship that it was much better to talk about their desires than to wait for their partner to guess. "Yes, but I want to surprise you. It's so rare for us to have one." "Are you sure?" "Well, we decided that surprises are for romantic young people." "I'm sure you'll like this one for sure." Her husband winked. In the evening, he delighted Lilia with completely unexpected news. Her husband begged his boss not only to leave at the right time, but also a small bonus. Now she could afford a more expensive resort or hotel. Since neither of the spouses had a foreign passport, and there was no need to apply for one, it was decided to pay attention to domestic resorts with the most interesting entertainment program. After an entire evening sitting at the monitor, the couple opted for the resort. It was my husband who decided on the city and the hotel. He himself offered to take on this role, after the couple defined the main list of requirements for the rest. A few days later, a happy and cheerful Thomas was walking out the door of the travel agency. He was looking forward to a great summer. After all, that was when his dream was going to come true. All the next day, Lilia read about the upcoming vacation. Her colleague, whom she considered a friend, never tired of admiring how well their circumstances had worked out, and the money was found, and the vacations coincided, and her husband added a good sum of money. "Lilia, you are so happy. I am so happy for you both. You are such a wonderful couple." "Oh, Helen, don't jinx it. I didn't expect it myself. It seems like an ordinary vacation. Some people take several times a year, but for me it is a very important and long-awaited event. I almost never went to school. My mom and grandmother and I saved money for everything. When I was a student, I worked part-time to have at least some pocket money. I didn't have time to go on vacation. In the summer, I took all kinds of part-time jobs to get ready for the new school year. And with this job, Lilia passed her hand around the office. One can only dream of a vacation. Money is barely enough for the basic necessities. Thank God my husband pays off the loans and mortgage with his salary." At these words, her friend strangely smiled. If Lilia had been looking at Lena at that moment, and not in the window, she would have noticed this strange grin, so unusual on the smiling and sweet face of her friend. In general, Lilia thought she was lucky with her friends. She had many girlfriends at school. However, gradually her interests changed and school friends were replaced by university ones. With both of them, she periodically called or exchanged messages, keeping in touch and keeping each other interested. At work, she also interacted well with many colleagues, but it was only Lena who reached the friendship stage. The girl had joined their team a little over a year ago and almost immediately became friends with Lilia. They turned out to have a lot in common. Helen was only 3 years younger than Lilia. The girl was tied up in a relationship and did not like to talk about her personal life, but willingly listened to the details that Lilia shared with her. Coming from a small village, Helen felt quite confident in the capital. In just 1 year, she had moved up the career ladder significantly, explaining her success by the fact that she worked hard and studied in her spare time. In fact, the secret of success was banal and simple. A short-term romance with the deputy CEO, which began at a corporate party. Who was busy with the girl's heart now, no one knew. However, after March 8, Lilia noticed her friend wearing new earrings from the latest collection of a fashionable jewelry house. It was them Helen showed her a couple of weeks ago and lamented that she would never earn such money and would not be able to afford them. And now she had. Lilia was not jealous, but she also preferred not to ask about the way she had received the gift. "I see you have." "Yes, I decided to order a copy of the earrings I liked. Remember I showed you?" Lilia decided to play dumb and pretend to believe her friend. In fact, the source of the gifts had no bearing on their friendship. Was it that important to find out? "Yes, I remember." It was a very high-quality copy, indistinguishable from the original. "Don't tell anyone. Let them think you have the whole department's annual salary in your ears." The girls laughed and continued working. The much anticipated time of summer was approaching. Normally, Lily was not very fond of this time of year. Part-time jobs, dacha, work, heat, stuffy office, stuffy transport, colleagues who only talked about vacation plans. And now she herself became the one who talked only about the sea and vacations every day. Demonstrating the wonders of savings, the girl was able to update her closet a little. Helen gave a few of her clothes in a fancy, very, very expensive suitcase to make a spectacular appearance at the hotel. The last days before the trip, Lilia hardly slept. Several times she checked the tickets, passports, clothes, cosmetics, and other small things, without which a vacation could not take place. It was decided to get to the place by plane. Wasting precious time on the train with its stuffy, cramped carriages was beyond her strength. The resort was several times better than she had expected. She wanted everything and at once. So she strove to fill her days with events, trips, and excursions with walks as much as possible. Her husband accompanied her with languid enthusiasm. However, 4 days after her arrival, out of the blue he expressed a desire to go on a horseback ride in the mountains. And this was Thomas, who was afraid to go near animals, and he didn't even walk a few blocks around dogs without a leash. Nevertheless, he was firm in his decision and safely refused to accompany his wife on the planned sightseeing tour of the city. "Lilia, but this is also my first vacation. I certainly haven't dreamed of it as much, but I can afford my own interests. What will I learn that is so important if I walk a few times through the streets that you and I have already walked several times?" "I agree, but you never objected to my plans, and your choice is somewhat unexpected. You don't like animals, and horses are not the best way to begin a friendship with our little brothers. But I will have an unforgettable experience." "Or a fracture with a concussion," the wife muttered to herself, but did not dare to say it out loud to her husband. The group with which she planned to go to explore the ancient city gathered fairly early in the morning. The tour guide was preparing some unimaginably posh show, and he needed to get the group together while it was cool. The man was supposed to leave for the walk an hour later, but he began packing even earlier than his wife. In the hustle and bustle of her own packing, without even bragging to his wife, the girl returned to her hotel room. Only in the evening, tired and full of impressions and new historical facts, she did not immediately notice that her husband apparently had not yet returned to the room, although the horseback riding, as Leah looked in the booklet, was supposed to be over before dinner. After taking a bath and changing her clothes, the girl decided to find out where her husband might have been so late. Calls went unanswered, which increased the anxiety that had begun. She decided to ask the hotel staff about her husband. Hardly anyone remembered the couple who had recently arrived at the hotel just to change and eat, only the reception clerk. "I could scarcely recall that a man matching Thomas's description had asked to order him a cab to a nearby town. Are you sure he was going on a horseback ride? I can show you the security footage," suggested the security officer, seeing how confused and upset the woman was. Oh, that would be wonderful. Lilia did not know whether to rejoice at this chance to learn about the fate of her husband or to be sad. After all, it turned out that he had lied to her. Unfortunately, the camera footage did not make things clearer. On the video, some man did get into a cab, but Lilia could bet she didn't see among her husband's belongings such a suit. The husband usually chose baggy and comfortable outfits that didn't need to be washed and ironed often, and the man in the video was wearing a white shirt and the same pants. His face was not caught in the camera lens, so she could not claim it was Thomas. Suddenly the girl. Porter remembered that the instructor of the equestrian club who had given the morning ride was now having dinner in the hotel cafe. Let me take you to him, and you will find out. The young girl had just recently got a job as a porter, and hoped very much that she would not have to call the police and rescue workers to look for her missing guest. So she decided to help his spouse in the search. I think the missing man went out somewhere, and will be back in the morning wrinkled with a stock of apologies. Jack, this is the girl who wanted to talk to you. She pointed to Lilia, a handsome, tanned man of about 35. She claims her husband went for a walk with you this morning and disappeared. Claims. Very interesting. With a smile, the instructor replied, getting up from the table and gesturing for Lilia to sit down at his table. Please. It's not very appropriate to talk while standing in a cafe. Lilia was astonished at the man's social manners, from whom she expected only a couple of dry answers. I don't remember. I haven't seen it. Thank you. I have a picture. Can you identify him, or do you have so many tourists during the day that you don't remember faces? First of all, my name is Jack, the man said, holding out his hand to Lilia. I don't like impersonal communication. And I'm Lilia. And my husband is Thomas, said the girl, shaking her heavily tanned hand. Famous. I don't remember that. I only had one group today. We're preparing a portfolio to promote our club, and for today's trip, we only took trained models of young girls, young men, and teenagers who attend our classes throughout the year. There were, of course, a few occasional clients, but I definitely remember there were no men of the right age among them. I have a picture of him. Take a look. Lilia was fascinated by the way he spoke in the man's deep, velvet voice. Perhaps for the first time in her life she felt something like this for a man. It was at that moment she wanted to become like those girls who adorned fashion magazines and paraded down the runway in expensive outfits. Nature had not deprived her of her looks, but now she wanted to be more than just pretty or cute. She dreamed of being a femme fatale. For a few minutes, she'd completely forgotten the purpose for which she had sat down at Yuri's table. No, that definitely didn't happen, the man replied, barely glancing at the photo. You look more closely. There were appealing notes in Lilia's voice, which did not escape the sensitive ear of the man, accustomed to the excessive attention from the ladies on vacation, seeking to have a short-term holiday romance. Ladies from whom he was terribly tired. Lilia, I can confirm my words to you. Just before you came, I was culling the pictures I took this morning on my walk. With these words, Jack laid out on the table in front of Lilia several colorful and vivid pictures in which a group of young, handsome, and perfectly equipped people were waving to the photographer, smiling and sitting on beautifully groomed horses. I see no one among the group. Then where could he have gone? The girl was ready to burst into tears, and Yuri felt human pity for her. Let me help you. I know someone at the rescue service. He can track down your husband's cell phone and through his own channels can look for any information. Did your husband bring his phone with him? Yes, but he hasn't answered for hours. I called him this afternoon, but I thought he didn't hear the call, and now something must have happened to him. After these words, the girl stopped holding herself back and burst into tears. All night, Jack and Lilia were calling hospitals' morgues, talking to rescue workers, and even managed to stop by the police station in an attempt to file a report. The search, and rescue team was able to assemble and start searching after they were able to track the signal coming from Thomas's cell phone. After verifying the coordinates, it turned out that the phone was on a remote wild beach. It was not until the morning that rescuers were able to get there to locate both the phone and its owner on the beach. The man was unconscious but alive. An hour after he was revived and given first aid, the husband was able to tell Lilia what had happened to him. After thinking hard about his wife's words about not going for a horseback ride, Thomas decided to go for a swim. The nearest beaches turned out to be crowded with vacationers, and he wanted privacy. He searched on the internet for the closest wild beach, and then he hit the road. However, he did not succeed in calculating his strength. He got a headache on the way to the bay. He barely made it a few meters into the bay, but eventually fainted. He tried to stay awake and swim to the shore, but the waves took him to the rocks. He lost consciousness and did not remember how he got to shore. He regained consciousness in the hospital. "I am such a loser," my husband smiled, pressing his hand to the lump on his head. "You scared the hell out of me. Didn't you realize how dangerous what you were up to was? And why didn't you pick up when I called you this afternoon? Probably didn't hear the call, and then you weren't able to." Lilia ran her hand over her husband's head and actually found a solid bump on the top of her husband's head. After consulting with the doctors and explaining to them the circumstances of her husband's accident, the woman decided to return to the hotel. Jack offered her a ride in his car, which seemed like the height of luxury. Her and her husband's modest car was nothing to compare with a powerful Jeep. It turns out that you are not only good at driving horses, you mean the size of the car. This is the only model which easily passes on all roads in all seasons. The instructors must earn good money. Lilia tried her best not to notice outright envy in his voice. It is possible to earn very good money here if you can competently build a business and cover all the basic needs of holidaymakers. It seemed that the man was ready to share with her the secret of how to earn good money. For several minutes they drove in silence, until Jack broke the silence. "Lilia, do you trust your husband completely?" "That's a strange question. Of course I do. We've been married for 3 years, and in that time, he has never once given me a reason to doubt his honesty or his faithfulness, for some reason." She added, "Why do you ask?" "The cove where your husband was found is notorious for very dangerous currents, and not the most comfortable beach for swimming. It periodically gathers people who like to tickle their nerves, and then the rescuers have to pull their bodies out of the water. I'm not quite sure where you're going with this. Does your husband play sports professionally? How many years has he been swimming? Swims. I didn't even know he could swim. All he does is run his fingers over the keys. He's a graphic designer and an it guy. Then he's just lying to you." The man said harshly and looked the girl intently in the eyes. The look sent shivers down Lilia's spine. "Why do you think so?" "First, he would not swim out if he lost consciousness. A sunstroke would not allow him to swim even a meter. Second, an inexperienced swimmer can't handle the current in the place your husband is talking about. And third," Jack was silent, as if choosing his words, "his head would split open on the rocks, like the other brave men we've found. And if he was looking for this place on the internet, he couldn't have not known that. The only thing he didn't consider was that I would tell you all about it." "But why would he lie?" "He's a quiet, gutless mama's boy who had no secrets from me. I'll tell you what, if I hadn't wanted to get married, he'd still be sitting at his computer, just looking more worn out." "I don't doubt that, but I thought you should know the truth. He had a reason, and from the looks of it, he didn't bother making up a cover story. How long have you been here?" 4 days ago. "When are you coming back?" 6 days. Be careful. You never know what's on his mind. At that moment, Lelia suddenly realized that Jack had been with her looking for her husband all evening and all night. And he must have had his own things to do and to rest after of a busy day, for sure. Besides, he might have had a wife or a beloved girl who would have been worried about him not coming home for the night. But to ask why he helped her, the girl could not dare. Maybe he was just being kind, or maybe he was up to something. In the end, her fear overcame her, and she decided, "Why are you helping me? You may well have limited yourself to saying that you have not seen your husband. Well, or showing photos that would prove that he was not with you on the walk. But you pulled all the strings to find him and rescue him. And now you're taking me to a hotel even though I'm not sure your house is near it. You are right." The man turned to her and smiled slyly. "Would you be satisfied with the version that I liked you very much? I wanted to make sure your husband wasn't worthy of you." No. It wouldn't, because it wasn't true. Partly, I assure you. I really liked you. And you were so frightened and confused that I couldn't go by and be indifferent to your grief, especially since it cost me absolutely nothing. You've burned more than $100 worth of gasoline, Lilia blurted out before she realized that such comments were clearly inappropriate. Do you drive a car? Yes. And I can tell you that we've driven quite a bit today, considering that the hospital is in another city. Some days I spend all day driving. That's when you really get a pretty tangible check. And today I'm taking you out on a date to an inexpensive cafe. These words made Lelia laugh. Well, since we have already gone on a date and spent the night together, I suggest we eliminate the last formality and switch to you, winked at her handsome driver. I would like to elaborate on the moment when we spent the night together, she said with a laugh. Isn't it? Look, it's already dawn, and we met before sunset. What's not a night together? I thought it had a different meaning because people have a habit of giving wrong meanings to things that have had a brief and succinct name for years. That's the concept you're talking about, isn't it? Right. You can spend the night holding hands and watching a stunning, bottomless sky. I refuse to call things and events by uncharacteristic names. Why the complications? Life is complicated enough as it is. He drove her to her hotel, said a dry goodbye, and left, promising himself never to cross paths with this girl again, who stirred in his soul emotions long forgotten, such that he had managed to forget, thinking he had lost the ability to enjoy them. After sleeping for only a couple of hours, Lilia decided to head to her husband's hospital in the morning. As she sat in the cab, she pondered the rider's words that her husband had absolutely lied to her. But why would he do that? What was he hiding? For the first time in 3 years, a feeling remotely resembling jealousy and suspicion stirred in her, and this to Thomas, whom even a stranger could read like an open book. Have you come for me? I'm so glad. I'm going to go pack. Her husband's excessive joy had already discouraged the girl somewhat. Are you sure about this? Maybe we should stay longer in the hospital. You have a serious concussion. I had a sunstroke yesterday. You don't joke about that kind of thing. The husband didn't seem to hear the last phrase outside the room, but it was heard by the doctor, who must have been Thomas's attending. Is this your husband? Yes. Are you his attending physician? Tell me, is he allowed to leave the hospital this early with a concussion this bad? Who told you he had a concussion? Just a small hematoma, nothing more. That's the kind of thing you can get from a slip on the beach. But he hit his head on the rocks. A wave tossed him onto a coastal rock in a wild cove not far from the Pearl Hotel. Apparently, the doctor was not yet aware of all the misadventures that had happened to her husband the day before. Dove, if your husband had been thrown by the wave on the rocks in the Black Bay, we would not be talking about his health now. The doctor confirmed Yuri's words, so the girl did not argue with him. Moreover, her husband, with a gym bag in his hands, dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, was walking briskly towards them. "You were going to wear a suit yesterday. I also reprimanded you that it was the most inappropriate clothes possible." My husband hesitated for a moment and then answered, "Well, I changed my mind about going for a walk. Changed at the hotel and went to the bay. I brought my towel too," said the husband, opening the bag, at the bottom of which lay the towel rolled up carelessly. However, it was difficult to recognize the snow-white towel in this rag. "Doctor, I can go, can't I? There's nothing bothering me. I'm healthy, and I don't want to stay in the hospital another minute. I would recommend bed rest for at least a couple of days and try to get less sun exposure. You had sunstroke yesterday. You can't joke about that. You're not a boy anymore, but I'm not an old man either. You're right, though. Perhaps I should take care of myself." Back at the hotel, the husband broke the woman the news. "I have decided to go back to Moscow." "Well, what sense to me to sit here? If I am prescribed bed rest and rest, I can rest at home, and at the same time I will work. And you so dreamed of this trip, stay here. Don't spoil the rest of your days. I don't think we'll be able to afford a trip like this anytime soon." "Then I don't understand you anymore. We haven't been able to afford a vacation in years. I wouldn't go home if I were you." "Lilia, I think you're making too much of this. Besides, I was not particularly impressed by the holiday, and the sea left me indifferent. I will go. Maybe I could get a refund for the unused days of vacation," he muttered as if to himself, but loud enough for the girl to hear. But she was so upset she didn't want to give those words any meaning. A few hours later, her husband got in a cab and went to the airport. By some miracle, he managed to buy a ticket. Or rather, it seemed like a miracle to Lila at that moment. Later, she found out where the origins of all the events that happened to them on vacation. But now the prospect of spending the much anticipated vacation alone loomed before her. "It's strange that he left me alone so easily. He'd never even considered it before. And now it's as if he's glad to go without me," a girl said to her reflection. Suddenly she lost interest in vacation. She wanted no excursions, no hiking in the mountains, and no walks in the city. It was so sad and lonely that she decided to go down to the cafe so the walls wouldn't press on her. Ordering a cup of coffee, she found a window seat she saw and sunk into unhappy thoughts about how unfairly fate had treated her. She had dreamed so much of this trip, had pinned so many hopes on it. What did the doctor diagnose him with? A bruised head. He was also very surprised when I mentioned the concussion. Lilia sighed and continued, as if she were talking to herself. "He never lied to me, never tricked me. He was guileless, uninitiative, soft-spoken. I find it hard to believe that he made all this up just to go home and leave me here. I don't believe me here. I don't believe it. I've tried many times to go on vacation alone, and he has forbidden it every time." "Lilia, did you know that you have different number of days? Yours is for 10 and his is only for 4. No? Is that possible?" I checked the vouchers several times. They were exactly the same. Yes, they may have been identical, but he called a few weeks ago and demanded to check you into a hotel on those terms, and without stating anywhere that he would be leaving the hotel early. Officially, he made it so that he would leave the hotel and the hotel would have to compensate him for the unused days. I had never heard of such a thing. Lilia was shocked, as if she were listening to a story about a stranger. "I'll bet no one has. But your spouse, like a tick, stuck to the employees of the travel agency, collected all the existing laws, and eventually got what he wanted. Are you sure?" "How do you know that?" Lilia was still hoping that the man was wrong. "Yes, because this is my hotel. Your cafe, your equestrian club. Are you a local oligarch?" "No." It's normal here to have your own tourist business. I opened the cafe for the convenience of tourists. A lot of people have lunch and dinner here because the hotel only provides breakfast, and the club was my childhood dream. I used to work there myself for many years, and when it went bankrupt, I took all the money and bought it back. For many years I was making a loss before I made a profit and could breathe. Your wife must be a very courageous woman. Yes, she might have been if she hadn't fallen off her horse on a dangerous trail. 3 days in intensive care and eternal rest without regaining consciousness. Yuri's voice was surprisingly calm. Apparently, the pain of the loss had already subsided a little, or he was trying not to show it to an unfamiliar girl. I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's okay. It's been many years since then. I got married very young. We tried to save the club together. And I saved it on my own. And I did everything else by myself, too. Lilia didn't know what to say in that situation. She had very little experience with the opposite sex. Anybody else in her position would have probably said something profound, but Lilia was simply confused. On impulse, she took his hand in a show of support. He stared into her eyes for a few seconds before withdrawing his hand. With a sigh, he offered, "May I suggest that you take a walk along the coast? You could squeeze a little exploratory tour into your busy schedule." I had canceled all my plans and had not yet decided what to do with the remaining days. The next few days passed completely unnoticed by the woman. The owner of the cafe asked her out on dates. They attended several excursions, a boat trip. While escorting her to the plane, he did not ask her to remember him and their little resort romance, which in fact was not one. Nor did he ask her to leave a number phone. He did not offer to continue communicating. They both understood that such a relationship had no future and could not have one. They never crossed the line. In all that time, the man did not even make an attempt to touch her, take her hand, and hug her. When she returned home, she found that her husband had been resting and recuperating all the days without her. All of the dishes had been messed up and were occupying the kitchen and dining room tables. Her husband's belongings were lying all over the house. The woman was in such a depressed state that she didn't even want to call him and scandalize him about it. To distract herself from her melancholy thoughts, she decided to do some house cleaning. She had 2 days before she had to go to work. She should not be allowed to return to work sad and depressed after a long-awaited vacation. After a few hours, the exhausted girl finally put the apartment in order. It remained to wash the floor in her and Thomas's bedroom. She would have liked to wipe down only the most conspicuous places and give up the hated task. But then her conscience wouldn't let her sleep in peace, after all. So taking the mop, the girl continued to fight the dust. Suddenly wringing out the rag, she found a gold earring tangled in the fibers and instinctively grabbed her ear to see if her jewelry was in place. Lilia was sure it wasn't hers, and a closer look made her realize who the owner was. Deciding to hide it until she had a chance to confirm her hunch, Lilia gave up cleaning the floors and opened the locker where she and her husband kept important documents. Now was a good time to take a closer look at their prenuptial agreement. In the evening, her husband returned from work and was unspeakably surprised, if not shocked, by his wife's presence at home. He seemed to have completely forgotten that her vacation had come to an end too. No wonder. You've been having such a wonderful time without me, Lilia thought to herself, but decided not to say anything out loud just yet. The girl was genuinely struck and amazed by this sudden change in her husband's behavior. Quiet and battered little man suddenly became confident. He joked, flirted, and constantly hummed silly modern songs. She knew exactly from whom he picked up this habit. Going back to work after a vacation was a difficult thing to do, even if the vacation had been spent in the countryside. This year, for the woman, it was unbearable to think that she would have to go back to the stuffy office with the fatigued employees. The vacation did her good. She received an unforgettable experience, got a tan and swam in the sea. and in the second half of her vacation, she decided not to tell anyone. Rumors and non-existent details could creep in. By summer, most of the team simply wasn't pulling their assignment duties. We had to double-check data, clarify, and repeat calls. The staff seemed to be in a sleepy state. However, the female employees quickly perked up as soon as Lilia entered the room. Women literally pounced on her with questions because she had so carefully prepared for the trip. In addition, there was a rumor that her husband had returned without her on the first day of work after her vacation. The woman recounted and recounted the details of what had happened to her and her husband on vacation. Colleagues oohing and ahhing deplored what misfortune had befallen their family, and at such a time, only one person did not ask anything, did not greet, and in general, carefully avoided meeting with her. Several times Lilia tried to call her and invite her to dinner. Her friend would hang up and send a message that she was very busy. She would drop by as soon as she could. Toward the end of the workday, she decided to go up to her friend's department on her own. As she approached her friend through the open door, she saw that Lena was being hugged by the Deputy General Director. When she saw her friend, she quickly freed herself from her boyfriend's embrace and came out to meet her. "Hi, you look great." She reached out to hug her friend, and she noticed that she didn't have an earring in her ear. "Thank you. The vacation was amazing. I had such a great time." "You did? Did I hear you had some problems on your vacation?" "Yes, such that my husband was hospitalized and had to go home alone." "Or was your vacation amazing after you sent your husband home?" The girl winked, but her companion noticed the way her eyes were running. Thomas took a bad swim and smashed his head on the rocks. "How do you know so well?" "Well, there are rumors." She saw that Helen had not prepared in advance and was now trying not to blurt out too much. "Oh, and where is your earring?" Lilia tried to put as much surprise into the words as possible. Helen really was frightened and grabbed her ear, to which her friend pointed. She could see that she was frantically thinking where she could have left it and how it could turn out. She must have lost it somewhere. They had very loose clasps. "It turned out that they were not from the same store," said the girl disappointedly, completely oblivious of the fact that the original version of their appearance was making a copy to order. Her friend had little faith in that version from the start. She was convinced that Helen was the woman her husband had spent the last few days with. "Where did that just come out of? Maybe she lost it in bed with our deputy." Lilia winked, hinting that Lena's affair had long been known to everyone. Suddenly Helen changed her face and hissed like a snake. "Lilia, my personal life is none of your damn business. Keep an eye on yours, as if you did not have to put your own horns on the door." Lilia was shocked by such a spiteful remark. "Helen, what does my personal life have to do with it? Why are you being rude to me? The whole office knows about you. I'm sure his wife knows too. But it didn't bother you before, or has something changed? Or is there something I don't know?" The last words she said in such a tone that anyone would have guessed. Lilia knows that her husband spends time with a colleague. However, in the next moment, something happened that no one expected. Girlfriend suddenly collapsed in a chair and burst into tears. And it was not ostentatious, cute tears, but a real hysteric. "Lilia, I'm sorry. I do not know how it happened. He's been paying attention to me for a long time, giving me gifts, wooing me beautifully. And now," without finishing the last sentence, the girl buried herself in her handkerchief and sobbed even louder. The woman was confused and did not know how to react to this. She had no desire to comfort her husband's mistress. When her friend's hysteria subsided, she admitted that she was having an affair with her husband. And now that affair has apparently borne fruit. "What do you mean?" Lilia didn't immediately take the hint. "Thomas and I are expecting a baby," said the girl, blushing. Lilia had never laughed so hard in her life. She had laughed so heartily, putting all the anxiety and worry of the last few days into her laugh. Helen didn't expect such a reaction and was completely confused. "Sweetheart, you seem to have become a bit of a glutton. Or there are too many men in your bed. What was it you said about presents? Did you get presents from my husband? I wonder where he got the money for them. He actually set up his own business. He bought a hotel in a resort, and he has an apartment from which he gets income." Helen blurted out, wanting to hurt her rival, but immediately regretted what she had said. "What, are you serious?" For some reason at that moment, Lilia remembered Yuri and his phrase that many people on the coast have their own hotel business. Apparently, Thomas also decided to join the businessman, and he even got an apartment from somewhere. "So, let's have it all." Lilia decided not to stand on ceremony with the girl, who turned out to be a common fool, despite her age. Hoping to use her looks to make her way to a lot of money, she believed all the promises, had an affair with several men at once, and ended up in an interesting situation, not even knowing exactly who the father of the child was. Realizing that she had already said too much, and it was useless to deny it, she told Lilia the story of her husband's transformation into a businessman. It turned out that before the marriage, he had a 2-room apartment in a nice neighborhood. The apartment was bringing in good money every month. The salary from one job was added to it, and it was many times more than what he voiced to his wife. He paid the mortgage and the loan himself. So, in case the marriage was dissolved, he planned to take away this apartment and the car as well. Over the years, he had accumulated a good amount of money, which was not surprising, given his terrible stinginess and frugality. He had long wanted to buy a house by the sea in fulfillment of his dream. However, throwing away the romantic component and assessing the possibility of profit, Thomas decided to buy not a house by the sea, but a hotel, small but generating a stable income. That's why he was so insistent about going where they went. It was there that he had chosen an excellent option and had arranged everything in advance with the salesman. All that remained was to come and see it in person and sign the papers. It took him exactly 4 days. While his wife was out sightseeing, he quietly did his business and pretended to have an accident so he could leave early to go straight back into the arms of his mistress. She listened and could not believe her own ears. And this was all her husband, the one she'd practically married, the one no woman had ever looked up to. There was definitely something about this life she didn't understand. Okay, that's understandable. But how did you get mixed up with him? I mean, he's only been a businessman for a week. I met him 6 months ago when he came to your office. He'd just been out of town on business. He invited me to a cafe. He was very kind and gallant. We talked for an hour. He's so smart, so well read. It's not him who's smart, it's you, an impenetrable fool, an utter lie. But decided that for now it was not worth making an enemy of her friend. She could use that pacifier. And then he suggested we meet again and again. Then I invited him to my place. He told me about his plans, that you didn't understand him at all, that he was tired of living with you and wanted to leave. He also told me that he wanted to have children with me. And now that he has a stable income and 2 apartments, you cannot count on yours. He has already learned everything. You have almost no right to it. We can move closer to the sea with our baby. With these words, naive Helen gently stroked her belly. Have you told him yet? No, I was going to today. No, I was going to today. Then let's postpone the conversation until tomorrow, or call me tonight. I won't fall asleep with impatience, said the girl with a laugh and left the room. A few minutes later, her husband called and told her he was going to be late at work today. In the evening, Helen called her. You knew everything, and you didn't tell me, she shouted angrily into the receiver. Yes, of course I knew. Or did you think that 3 years of marriage wouldn't bring up little things like infertility? Why didn't you tell me today? Why didn't you? I wanted you to do it yourself, but we're friends. She seemed to genuinely think that she and Leela would still be friends after that. Of course, except you left out one little detail. You slept with my husband. You wanted to leave me with nothing and live happily by the sea. Did you tell him I knew you were having an affair? No, he just left. He said it was over between us. He dumped me. Can you imagine the bastard? So he's on his way home now. Yeah, he said you're the only one he's perfect for. Listen, don't you want to get back at him? I have an idea and I need our help. You don't have to do anything special. Of course I'll show him. All you have to do for now is keep quiet and tell the second boyfriend that he is going to be a father. And hung up, a woman said with a laugh, and hung up. At that moment she heard the front door open. The husband returned extremely excited, worried and very affectionate, brought a bouquet of flowers, which had never happened to him, and all evening he tried to fulfill his wife's every wish. Unfortunately for him, his wife already knew the reason for this striking change. She decided to start by going to the bank that gave them a mortgage. They confirmed to her that there was a possibility of unequal division of the home in a divorce, if one spouse had taken on a large obligation to pay the loan. However, after learning that the couple had entered into a prenuptial agreement, the staff referred Lilia to lawyers who looked into all the details. It turned out that the prenuptial agreement had an advantage in the dissolution of the marriage. First of all, they had to fulfill its terms, and that meant that the woman had to prove the fact of adultery, and the earring under the bed was obviously not enough. Helen, of course, might or might not have given the necessary evidence. Therefore, stronger evidence was needed. A photograph and a recording of the conversation would have suited the purpose. So it was necessary to persuade her friend to bring her lover out in a frank conversation. The question of the premarital apartment remained unclear. She decided to clear it up with her husband's mother. The poor old woman burst into tears as soon as she heard that her daughter-in-law knew about the apartment. She was very much afraid of this, and of the fact that her son would divorce his wife as soon as she found out about such an ugly deed. To claim this property Lilia could not and did not plan to, but her husband opened for her a new, very unsightly side. She wanted to say to his face what she thought of him, but she decided to be patient. As a farewell, Lilia promised to pay her mother-in-law back the money she had taken from her for a vacation. It seemed that after the vacation, the girl became a completely different person, and the world around her was changing very quickly. Or maybe it had been that way before, but she preferred not to notice it. The next day, she and her friend decided that it was time to reveal to her husband that her wife knew everything. Lilia needed a recording of the confession and a photo of her husband with his mistress. So on her lunch hour, Helen invited the man to her office. She worked in her office, alone, and colleagues would not interfere with their conversation. The plan was for Lilia to hide in the same place and appear at the hottest moment. She told her husband that she had been sent to the branch near Moscow in the morning to get the documents for the new employees. Darling, we need to talk. The friend was the very charm and tenderness. Today we have nothing to talk about. You had me wrapped around your finger. You have me wrapped around your finger. You have another man, and you've decided to hand your child over to me. There was resentment in every word. Oh, come on, honey. I just wanted to see if you were serious, so I made up this story about the baby. Well, I'm sorry I acted like a fool. I'm sorry I acted like a fool. I'm so ashamed. It's true. Are you sure you made it all up? The man seemed ready to believe anything. Of course I did. If you want, we can meet at lunchtime, and you can see for yourself how sincere my feelings are.